Hey everyone, welcome back to Berlin Noir. Today we're going to be continuing working in the Kreuzberg area where we were in the previous episode and working towards filling in this area here east of the city. And today, to start off, we are going to be working on this part here, the Emmaus Church here at Lausitzer Platz. So just that, you can see pretty clearly there, the plaza there with the church. And it's an interesting area because you also have the elevated U-Bahn line that is right in front of it and with some kind of interesting angled blocks kind of surrounding it. So I figured this would be cool to build. And as you see, it's a relatively short episode, so a pretty quick build. But since we didn't really have any assets on the workshop that looked like this church, I figured just do somewhat of a PO build. Just to kind of make it a little more interesting and kind of match the church a little bit more compared to any just generic church that I would have found on the workshop. But so today the church is definitely a little different than how it was back then. This is how it looked back then. You can see it has the main steeple in the front with kind of like that smaller little part that sticks out in the back. So I wanted to find an asset that just had a single steeple, didn't look too fancy, and also I wasn't sure, so someone's going to have to let me know here. But today the church kind of has like a turquoise-ish color roof, and I think it's metal as well. And that's because it was demolished during World War II, part of the church, at least most of it. I think pretty much everything but the main steeple was destroyed, but they rebuilt everything else. So I'm not sure if the church back then was also this color. And another interesting thing is this part here. So these little circular, not really sure what they were, but you can kind of see them in that aerial view there that I just showed a second ago. That's not really sure what they were, but they were definitely noticeable and kind of add a little bit of, I guess, uniqueness to the church, since I, of course, wanted to make it look different than all the other ones that are nearby, especially considering I have used this church asset before. But this part of the church, those circular little things on the back side of the church, they aren't there today in real life, so I guess when it was rebuilt, those were not part of the rebuild. So I did want to include that since, again, it's different. It makes the church a little more unique, and as well as making the roof color that kind of turquoise color, which I'm okay with, I guess. It's not perfect, I guess, but I think if you weren't aware of what the church looked like before I changed its color, I think you wouldn't really notice too much. And most importantly, I'd say, is the fact that the turquoise color matches on both those assets. So both those kind of little circular dome things there are very similar in color to the main part of the church. So I think that was definitely kind of a deciding factor as far as whether or not I was actually going to be able to do this, because I actually had to rebuild this church since, or I should say rebuild it on camera, since I always kind of mess around with, right before I do a build, especially if it's a PO build, I always mess around with different assets, different things I could possibly use for it. Because when it comes to PO, some assets work great with it, you can customize them wonderfully, others not so much. So there's been plenty of times where I've used an asset and been like, this is going to be perfect, it looks so similar, just a couple little tweaks with PO, and it'll be great. But turns out, that asset isn't very great to use with procedural objects, so I have to end up using something else. But in this case, this church, as well as the church for those little circular domes, those were both my first choice. So I built those in like 5 minutes, and I was like, well, dang it, I should have recorded this, because it turned out pretty much exactly as I was hoping. So I just had to quickly rebuild it, which wasn't a big deal. I made like a small improvement here or there. So in the end, it was okay, but I don't know why I honestly don't just record everything I do, because it would save me a lot of time, because I do that occasionally where I just don't record something and end up doing something, building something that is cool and worthy of being recorded, and I either just have to rebuild it or I just move on and be like, oh well, I guess that's not going to be part of a video. So yeah, I don't know, maybe I need to do better on that in the future and actually make a conscious effort to avoid doing that and not wasting good builds or anything like that. But anyways, moving on from that. So we're working on now, I guess, the plaza part of the church, since that's pretty much most of the build. The actual PO job on the church was relatively simple, as I just mentioned, and went very smoothly. Although I do want, if anyone has any information as far as what the color of the roof was back then, so prior to it being rebuilt, if it wasn't actually that turquoise color, definitely let me know, because I'd be okay changing it back, just because, again, not knowing that I changed the color, I think it's all right, but knowing that I did change the color and what it looked like originally, I think it looks maybe a little weird. I don't know, let me know what you all think about that. But yeah, anyways, so with this plaza area, they're very similar, all the ones throughout the city. I've built a number of them now. I should say the plazas with churches at them. So, for instance, the St. Michael and St. Thomas churches nearby that we built, those both have very similar designs, just with the paths, trees, bushes, hedges, fences, just pretty simple, straightforward stuff. But they all look so nice, back then in the pictures and the aerial view. So I always feel like it's kind of hard to recreate these as nice as they were, because they always have a lot of detail on the ground, which is always kind of overlooked in city skylines. I know I do that all the time, because of course that is kind of how it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be a bird's eye view build, right? You're not looking at this first person. I rarely ever do first person stuff in here, kind of going for the bigger picture stuff from looking up above. But I still always feel like I'm missing stuff, just because I know there is some finer details at the ground level that I'm missing out on. So I felt like I wanted to do something a little different now. Nothing too crazy, right? Because of course adding all those details can be very time consuming. But for instance here, just adding some of those moss decals. But I also wanted to add some grass, because I've seen recently a couple images of people's builds on Instagram, and they've been kind of placing down grass like this, which I have done before. Maybe not so much in Berlin Noir, but just on my own and in Las Colinas, all the way back in that California city, which started this YouTube channel. And I feel like that's just a really nice addition, especially if it's just a central focal point, right? Obviously, you can do that everywhere, and that's going to be a horrible idea, because it's going to be very time consuming and slow down your computer. But for instance here, since that's kind of right up in the front, and there's that big tree, so you can kind of see under the tree pretty easily, just adding that additional kind of layer there, because I wish there was kind of a vanilla feature to add some, I guess, depth or something to the grass. Because of course there's the vanilla tufts, right? The grass tufts, which I have used before, I think even in the series, where I've just kind of been sometimes it looks good, sometimes it looks like crap. And I just kind of sucked it up and been like, all right, hopefully it'll make the good times look good. But I think obviously now, since there's no grass tufts, at some point I decided to just get rid of them, because they're not super good. And they're very low detail and just can ruin so many nice areas. So I obviously ultimately got rid of them. But I wish there was something else in this game just to add a little texture, something that pops out, not so flat. Because that's definitely something this game is missing. And unless you do it manually by placing grass tufts or tiny little hedges or bushes or whatever everywhere, which of course you do to make it look realistic, but it just, obviously you can only spend so much time detailing the foliage and vegetation in an area. It can just get so repetitive and overwhelming. So with that being said, I do think I'm going to start putting grass like that in more prominent areas, that even if it's small, for instance, I really only did that in that one area at the front of the church, right? The larger grass patch at the back of the church obviously doesn't have it, because that would have been kind of too big to do. But for small areas here and here, or here and there, I think it'll be a nice addition just to add some small detail to it. I keep forgetting, but I need to find the smaller grass tuff assets, since the ones I use there aren't my favorite. But there's just some very simple grass tufts, which I think they're actually props as well, because I'm subscribed to the larger grass props or grass tufts, but they're a little too big to fit in small areas like that. So I just need to go and find the small ones, because they're really nice, low poly, but they look quite nice. And definitely start doing that in other places in the city. But anyway, so moving on from that, so that's pretty much the church build there. And I wanted to then build just kind of around there, obviously, and I figured, since the previous episode where we just did a whole lot of just kind of generic blocks, filling them in, doing just simple blocks, of course, everything that they had. And you all really liked that, and you all really liked the previous one that I did quite a while ago, probably like 15 or 20 or 25 episodes ago, actually. But since both of those were very popular, I figured why not keep doing that occasionally. Not obviously not every episode is going to be filling in large blocks like that, but I'll definitely try and include just filling in some blocks here and there in each episode, since you all seem to enjoy that quite a lot. And obviously there's a whole lot of that needs to be done, and might as well put that on camera rather than just me simply doing it off camera as I normally do. But also I figured here I didn't really have a whole lot of a choice, since there wasn't, or I shouldn't say there wasn't stuff to build here, there just wasn't a lot of stuff to build here that I could do easily or quickly, since, there's the Gurlitzer Bahnhof, which is the old large train station with the rail yard. That's right next to this, but that's going to be kind of its own episode. And there's like a plaza out in front of it, which I considered building, but I figured I'd save that for the train station build. And just there wasn't really a whole lot of other things I could do, I think, in a good amount of time. So that's why I ended up just doing these blocks here, detailing them, of course, and then keeping the episode relatively short, less than 20 minutes, which we haven't done in a while as well. But I don't know, I felt like it was just a better idea just to simply make it a short episode rather than forcing myself to include some other stuff that might not have been as interesting, or doing a little too much, like encroaching on what would be the episode for the train station build, which could potentially be the next episode. We'll see, since like I said, that is like right next to this, and I've been kind of itching and really eager to build another train station, since I haven't done that in quite a while. When we built the Lehrter Bahnhof as well as the rail yard there, and they're just really fun to build. I don't know, I think it's just in general in City Skylines, people love to build large kind of rail yards and train stations, and all those details that go into that. It always looks awesome. So yeah, that could potentially be the next episode. We'll see how it goes. Also probably, because I as I mentioned before in the previous episode, as well as I think today, that I'm really kind of wanting to fill in this entire area of Kreuzberg and just kind of fill it in. And since it's kind of surrounded by rivers or the canal on all sides, it'll kind of just be a nice accomplishment to fill that all in and kind of have a border. And so I've been kind of working towards that, I think, now for the near future. But that being said, I'm sure I'm going to bounce around occasionally, work in some other areas as well, if I kind of run out of motivation to work in this particular area. But nonetheless, the goal is for the near future, I think, to at least fill in this area here. And I think it's definitely going to be worth it focusing on this area and just kind of having an area totally, completely finished, since everything else in the city is kind of just lumped around, right? There's kind of little groups here and there of buildings and things I built, but there's not a whole lot of continuity between them. A whole lot of spaces and kind of just areas that have popped up, which is good for making episodes since I can build all those interesting things. But as far as just having an actual city that feels good, feels realistic, looks good, that's obviously not very nice considering you have all those spaces and gaps in between. So definitely want to work on that and filling in some spaces, and this is, I think, a good place to start. But so yeah, as far as detailing these go, I wanted to do stuff a little different than what we did in the previous episode. So for instance, in the previous episode, did a whole lot of like kind of more industrial feel to the detailing in these blocks. And since these are relatively small, I figured that wouldn't really make sense to have large industrial things. Also, obviously, you wouldn't really be able to fit it. Really, as far as that goes, industrial dirty type stuff, I only did that right here. Just those short little 2-story buildings there that kind of fit in nicely there, just kind of going across. I liked how those looked, and not exactly sure what that would have been. I think I just added some just generic trash props, as you can see here, piles of wood, trash, papers, whatever, and then just some pallets of beer. Just why not, right? Not sure why, just trying to do some different stuff. But another thing I wanted to focus on, since I really haven't been doing it for a very long time, is kind of the street side detailing. So, we're talking about shops and restaurants and markets and just kind of stuff that you see typically on the streets. And that's something I did a lot at the start of the series. So all the way back, we're at 50, whatever, 6 episodes now. So a very long time since I did a whole lot of kind of that street level detailing along the buildings and along the sidewalks. And it makes a huge difference because I think what kind of happened while I kind of stopped doing that was at the start, I didn't really do a whole lot of detailing in the center of blocks. I just kind of threw some trees down and called it a day. And that way I kind of focused, I guess, more so on the streets and the front side of the buildings and detailing that. But once I started focusing a little more on the detailing behind the streets in the center of all these large blocks, the courtyards, that type of thing, I think I just kind of slowly stopped detailing the front. I don't even think I was totally aware of it. I totally forgot about it. But I think recently, in the previous episode, we did those street side gardens that line the streets. And there was also those type of street side gardens in another episode we did fairly recently. And those just looked so nice and really brought to life the street. Because, of course, it's perfectly realistic and necessary to have all those details on the street, those in front of the buildings like this. But it is time consuming. And I guess focusing on the bigger picture, I kind of let that go because I was more concerned with expansion. And, unfortunately, there's areas like that aren't really detailed on the front. So I think that's definitely something I'm going to need to start doing again. So that's, of course, it's going to be a little more time consuming, but just having these little markets like this, I just love it. It just feels so much more alive. So it's definitely going to be worth doing in future episodes for sure. But anyways, I guess that's pretty much going to do it for this episode today. Hopefully you all enjoyed it. I know it was a shorter one, but I wanted to keep it a little more focused on just one build and not too many things. But if you did enjoy, definitely give it a thumbs up and leave a comment if you're interested. Perhaps you want to see something built in the future. But otherwise, I will see you all next time.